Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're decoding a classical Buddhist manuscript to uncover how an ancient tale of murderous rage transforms into a really profound psychological lesson. We're going to look closely at a text that starts out like a high-octane action movie, but ends with what is arguably one of the most brilliant psychological pivots in ancient literature. So, the text we're examining is a digitized historical manuscript, beautifully preserved and translated by the Beta Foundation. It's known as the Sutra of King Udayana's Questions to the Buddha. And to really grasp the core message of this manuscript, we kind of have to drop right into the middle of the story, during a wildly intense moment. Let's look at this first turning point, a miraculous and dramatic assassination attempt. Picture this. The stage is set with King Udayana. He's completely blinded by a jealous rumor spread by another woman in the court, a nasty rumor claiming that his wife, Queen Samavati, has been unfaithful. He falls into a fit of absolute, uncontrollable rage. The king marches straight up to the queen, draws his bow, and fires an arrow point blank right at her. But the arrow doesn't strike her. Instead, the sutra describes how the weapon literally bursts into flames, reverses direction midair, and hovers right next to the king without actually harming him. Completely stunned, he screams, "Are you a heavenly maiden, a ghost, or a demon? My arrows never miss." Now, you really got to ask yourself, what kind of power actually stops a speeding arrow? Well, the queen calmly explains that she isn't a demon or a ghost at all. She's a dedicated disciple of the Buddha, and she used the sheer, tangible power of pure, focused loving kindness, this deep, unshakable state of compassion to halt the weapon right in midair. Which brings us to the core of the Buddha's teaching. Shaken to his core by this undeniable miracle, the king immediately travels to see the Buddha. But, he's still deeply defensive. He's actively seeking validation for his own anger. He actually demands that the Buddha teach him about the faults of women, looking for an excuse to blame female seduction and deception for his murderous rage. But the Buddha brilliantly subverts this entire bias. Instead of validating the king's anger, he flips the mirror directly onto the king himself and says, "Let's look at the four faults of men." He invites him to explore exactly what these four psychological traps really are. Let's break these down. Fault number 1, the cost of lust. The sutra literally pulls no punches here. It defines this not just as a physical desire, but as a deeply rooted obsession that completely destroys a person's good judgment. It isolates people from wise influences and actively pushes them toward terrible companions. The text uses incredibly visceral, unapologetic language to describe this state. It compares a lustful obsession to a vast pit of impurity or a dog eating filth. It's deliberately harsh, meant to shock the listener into realizing how unchecked obsession completely degrades a person's character and traps them in this endless cycle of suffering and bad decisions. Moving right along to the second fault, ingratitude, and the tragedy of abandoning your parents. The text lays out a really deep tragedy here. Grown individuals who just abandoned their frail, aging parents, the very people who sacrificed everything to raise them, choosing instead to selfishly chase their own worldly desires. It sets up this absolute stark moral binary. On one hand, abandoning your parents leads to a descent into the Avicii hell, which is this gruesome realm of ultimate karmic punishment. But on the flip side, practicing filial piety, actively honoring and caring for them, guarantees heavenly rebirth, worldly prosperity, and a life that's protected from harm. Fault number 3 focuses on false views and evil. You know that tendency to make terrible life decisions and then just surround yourself with yes men who only validate those bad choices? That's exactly what this is. It's an ego-driven delusion where a person's actions are cheered on by fools, but fiercely condemned by anyone wise. The crucial takeaway is that this willful ignorance guarantees a life of spiritual and moral poverty. By clinging to arrogance and rejecting the teachings of wise figures, these individuals basically wander blindly through life. They are completely lost in the dark, missing out on enlightenment entirely. And finally, the fourth fault, evil karma and the pursuit of unethical profit. This fault highlights the extreme, honestly disturbing lengths people will go to in order to acquire wealth, completely destroying their own morality in the process. The text gets highly specific, calling out things like selling animals, cheating others, and engaging in dangerous trades just for the money. The idea is that by treating other living beings as mere commodities, a person becomes utterly enslaved to their own greed. They end up wearing it like a heavy, suffocating chain around their neck. To really drive the point home, the sutra paints a highly cinematic and honestly pretty brutal picture of karmic retribution. It describes sinners being boiled in giant iron cauldrons for millions of years, their flesh torn apart by iron dogs and birds with sword-like teeth. Wow, it is a stark, terrifying, and unforgettable warning against living your life without any moral boundaries. This all builds to our final section, the final awakening. After absorbing all these terrifying teachings, the Buddhist psychological mirror trick works flawlessly. The king finally, truly sees the reality of his own ego and his actions. He completely repents. He declares, "I shall take refuge and abandon the faults of lust and weapons, having compassion for all living beings." He literally drops both his physical weapons and his defensive psychological walls to walk a new path of peace and moral clarity. It's a total 180-degree transformation. We're actually able to dive into this wild journey today, from murderous rage to profound enlightenment, thanks entirely to the meticulous digitalization by the CBATA Foundation. Supporting their vital work ensures that these amazing ancient insights remain accessible for all of us. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder, directly inspired by the king's journey. In our modern lives, what attachments are we treating as rewards that are actually holding us captive? How many of our daily obsessions, our angers, and our selfish pursuits are really just arrows that we're shooting at ourselves? Think about it.